What makes a successful team? Success is measured by team output, team viability, and member development and growth. We know a lot about teams and team dynamics. We know that teams are often riddled with conflict, with difficult personalities, with resource and external constraints. However, the research tells us that to the extent that we're able to harness the expertise of members, that's really what's going to lead to successful team performance. Given that, how can you be more effective in contributing your ideas, in considering the perspectives of others, in making sure that the relevant expertise of all of the team members gets harnessed toward the betterment of the team's outcomes? My goal today is to get you to be a more effective member and leader of a high-performing team. Research has shown that teams exhibit the common knowledge effect. The shared information gets most of the airtime at the expense of the unique information held by each of the individuals. Teams get assembled when different perspectives, bases of knowledge, ideas are needed for the decision at hand. In these instances, the goal is to leverage these perspectives to make the best possible decisions. However, we know that in teams, the members tend to talk about the information that they share. The problem is that they mistake shared information for critical information. They overweight it. And teams and individuals begin to question any information that falls outside the shared domain. As a consequence, they have so much more access to the common information, and that's what drives their decision-making processes, rather than being able to incorporate the unique information that their different members possess. Imagine you're on a team and you've made a determination that you need another individual who has product delivery expertise. After sorting through the resumes, you identify 3 individuals who meet at least the minimum criteria in product delivery experience. So now what type of information do you have? You have the resumes, which are shared. Everyone on the team has access to that. You have the interviews, which are partially shared, and you have the reference checks. For each reference, only one member of your team has firsthand access to that information. So based on the common knowledge effect, we know that the resume information is going to get the bulk of the discussion time. And the reference checks, the unique information possessed by members, is not going to get discussed a whole lot. So the team picks the second candidate, the one who looks great on paper. She looked great based on the shared information, but not so great if you consider the unique information of the reference checks. In contrast, the team didn't pick the third candidate, the one whose resume, the shared information, looked fine, but whose unique information, the reference check information, made him look fantastic. Consequently, the choice of candidate 2 was suboptimal. The team likely spent more time discussing the resumes, the shared information, and gave less airtime to the reference check information, which would have made clear that candidate 3 was really the best choice. There's been a lot of research conducted on the common knowledge effect. What they find is that shared information is given much more consideration than the unique information that's possessed by members. This isn't the full story. It turns out that there's actually hierarchy in teams, as many of you know. Status differentiation isn't always a good thing for getting all of the relevant information identified and considered. Possessing status can cause leaders to step up. But what we know is that high status members of teams often have their contributions overweighted. And low status members have their contributions, their unique knowledge, underweighted. Let's take Downton Abbey, a popular British drama set in the early 20th century. In a recent episode, Lord Grantham's youngest daughter comes home because she is due to deliver the first grandchild of the family. Lord Grantham insists on bringing in a highly esteemed physician, Sir Philip. The local family physician who has delivered all of the family's children and who has treated everyone in the household is largely cast aside. Both, however, are present as the birth approaches. The local family physician begins to realize that there are symptoms suggesting that there is something very wrong with the pregnancy. Sir Philip, the higher status physician, insists that everything is going according to plan. Lord Grantham, a man of his times who is focused on social standing, largely ignores what the longtime physician has said. So here, the lower status physician, presenting significant, concrete information, was disregarded. The status of the person who contributes the unique information often determines the degree to which team members will emphasize and consider that information as they make their decisions. Research tells us that in a team, only a handful of people talk most of the time. In a 5-person team, 2 people talk 70% of the time. In a 6-person team, 3 people talk 70% of the time. And in an 8-person team, 3 people talk 67% of the time. Airtime translates to perceived influence. Perceived influence means who gets credit for contributing. When members of the team are asked who had the most influence, the person that they identify is the person who has talked the most, not necessarily the person who has moved the conversation the most. There are unique challenges to getting the voices of women and minorities heard. The good news is that the solutions that I'm going to share with you will enable all voices to get heard. In a study that I conducted with a colleague, we were interested in understanding how male experts and female experts' information influenced team decision-making processes and the outcomes that those teams got. We asked individuals to first complete a task, one that many might argue is male-gendered, a survival task. We assigned the individuals to teams, and so in any given team, we knew, they didn't know, but we knew who the most expert member was. In doing our analysis, what we discovered was that those teams in which the most expert individual was a male outperformed the teams in which the most expert individual was a female. Now, this is despite the fact that male experts and female experts were equally expert. When we looked more closely, we found that female experts were less influential, they were less able to get the teams to do what they wanted them to do than were male experts. Being an expert means having different information. In some domain, you know more than others do. However, if there's not an expectation that you could possibly be an expert, different information is considered to be wrong information, and it gets discounted. And teams don't have access to what actually is very valuable information that would help them perform better. In a follow-up study, we found that when female experts' contributions were intentionally solicited by another member of the team, they were perceived as more influential and more competent than when they just contributed the information without having been solicited. And we also found that males whose information was solicited were also evaluated more favorably than when their information had not been solicited. Here are 3 solutions to leveraging member knowledge and creating good team outcomes. 1. Identify and leverage your expertise. 2. Enlist early support. 3. Engage others. 1. How can you get your expertise identified and leveraged? You've got to jump into the conversation early. Airtime matters. If you have difficulty jumping in, give yourself a time limit. Say within the first 5 minutes, I'm going to say something. You may actually want to set a goal for how many contributions you're going to make in a given team discussion. If someone preempts you and says something that you were going to say it again. Validate what they're saying. Be prepared to explain and give evidence supporting what you are recommending. Be specific in providing evidence. 2, enlist early support if you think that an idea will be foreign to others. Socialize it before the actual meeting. Pick 1 or 2 people to whom you can sell your ideas before the meeting actually takes place. 3, engage others. As a big L leader, this is definitely your responsibility. Live up to your potential. Create a culture in which all individuals feel that their ideas are valid. Lend your status to others. Ask them for evidence of the point they are trying to make. Tell others about their expertise. For example, say, did you know that Morgan was actually the strategy brainchild behind our reorganization? As your team is discussing, urge members to consider each alternative at a time. Could it be X? What evidence do we have supporting X? What evidence do we have that's inconsistent with X? Think of yourself as a leader, and you'll be more likely to contribute and consider the unique information that's presented by your teammates.
The strongest position you can come to a meeting with is your passion. And starting a contribution to a meeting, especially early on, where you're coming at it from the core of something you're passionate about or something you have an expertise in, is so much stronger than starting with raising your hand and saying, this might be a stupid comment, but, or I don't know anything about this area. I don't know anything about marketing, but. Rather, starting with your expertise. I am an expert in community software, or I am an expert in viral marketing. Starting with your area of expertise and then building on the bridge between your expertise and the point that you want to make is so much more powerful and effective than beginning with, this is probably stupid, but.
One of my favorite rules of great management is making sure that you give the quiet ones a voice, that everybody around the table gets a voice. When I was at my startup company, I found that the salespeople were naturally talking a lot more than the engineers. So there were a couple of things I did to make sure that I was giving the engineers a voice. One was in a meeting, I made sure I didn't just listen, but I watched people's faces and body language. And when I saw somebody frowning, I would say, you're frowning, Jack, what's up? What are you thinking? And give Jack an opportunity to speak up. Another thing that I would do is make sure different people like to talk in different ways or communicate in different ways. And I wanted to give everybody an opportunity to communicate in the way that was most comfortable for them. So sometimes I would have a debate in a Google document where people could comment, read, and write instead of talk. And that often got the quiet voices to the table.
When dealing with a disruptive or a dominant personality in a team meeting, I take a sort of a two-part approach. The first is addressing the behavior at that moment. And I find that by very deliberately saying thank you and moving on, that can be successful. However, I also recognize that it's important in the long term to address this. And so I will oftentimes schedule a one-on-one meeting with that individual. And that serves both to allow them to share their idea and to sort of reinforce that I am interested in their contribution, just not in their disruptive behavior. In addition, it allows me the opportunity to lay out and to reinforce what are acceptable behaviors, such that as a team, we're successful in achieving the shared outcome.
One of the things I found to be so helpful in running meetings and running teams is using ground rules. Ground rules, principles of how we're going to interact are your friend. And specifically, if you get everybody's commitment up front into how we want to operate as a team, when things get heated or when things get off course, we have the ground rules to come back to. And because everybody agreed to them and made a commitment up front, it becomes something that isn't personal anymore, that somebody's done something wrong or somebody has done something right. It's about what we have established as our team commitments. And I've just found that to be really helpful in keeping teams on track and keeping them effective.
One of my very best friends gave me what I consider to be salient advice when I took on a leadership role. It resonated with my experience as a surgeon, and it was essentially to be bold and to have a thick skin and to appreciate that ultimately everything is your responsibility. This can be quite daunting, and I find the best approach is to build a great team.
One of the things that I've learned is that if you allow people to rely on each other almost as sort of mental prostheses, it builds a great cohesion on the team. People don't want each other's jobs. There's less politics, and we can do great things together as a team.
Knowledge is power. The unique knowledge, the expertise in your teams is critical. To the extent that you as a member or leader of a team can unleash the knowledge, your team will perform better, you'll get credit, and you'll be more effective at work. What can you do tomorrow to make sure that your expertise gets identified and leveraged? Remember that research says that airtime matters, so jump into that conversation early.